Hi, I'm Bruce Whitey, producer of Was That a Wolf, which just won an award at Best of the Northwest Festival. And I couldn't have done it without MCAT. And what's great is that this program is being used by wildlife agency personnel for staff training for wolf identification to differentiate wolves from wolf-like dogs and coyotes. And one of my hopes is that it will be used in hunter education courses so that hunters can learn to differentiate wolves from coyotes, and there won't be any cases of mistaken identity that resulted in the death of a wolf, as happened this last fall down south of Yellowstone. What's that? This is not a wolf. This is a wolf. Stay, girl. Don't move.
For the next 30 seconds, the station is conducting a test. We repeat, this is only a test. What are you seeing? A wolf, dog, or coyote?
Hi, I'm Mike Jimenez. I'm a wildlife biologist, and I spend a lot of time in the field working with wolves. There are 4 clues that can help you distinguish the difference between wolves, coyotes, and dogs. The 4 clues are visual sightings, scats, tracks, and howls. You might think a visual sighting is the most conclusive. After all, as many people say, I believe it when I see it. However, most wolves steer clear of humans. If you should see a wolf, the sighting will probably be from a distance and it'll last only a few moments, especially if the wolf senses your presence.
Bear in mind that most people want to believe they saw a wolf. And, as any magician will tell you, the eyes can lie. While positive identification is difficult based on a momentary sighting, knowledge of a wolf's physical characteristics and how they differ from a coyote and dog can help. The physical differences of the 3 species are best seen in the contrast between overall size, coloration, tail, and facial features.
The main thing I'd like you to remember is that we're talking in generalities. In real life, there's exceptions to every rule. In general, however, wolves are larger than dogs or coyotes, and in the Rockies, they weigh 70 to 115 pounds. They stand about 2.5 feet tall at the shoulders, and from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tail, they range from 5.5 to 6 feet.
Coyotes, on the other hand, stand about 1.5 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh in at 20 to 35 pounds. Now, even though wolves are larger than coyotes, their sizes do overlap, particularly in the autumn when pups of the year are the same size as large coyotes. As seen here, these young wolves bear an uncanny similarity to coyotes, and hunters always need to pay particular attention to their targets.
When viewed from the front, a wolf's chest appears narrow, its forelimbs point in, and its paws point out. Compared to other canids, it has especially long legs and large paws. And because of that lanky look, many people's first impression is that they might have seen a deer or a calf.
Yeah, the first time I saw a wolf, I thought it was a calf. Its legs were so long.
An important point to remember about visual sizings is that it's difficult to gauge the proportions of an animal when there's nothing nearby to compare it with.
And unlike this socialized wolf, most wolves will not allow you to measure them.
While the color of wolves varies from white to black with assorted shades of brown and gray, in the Rockies, wolves predominantly range from black to a grizzled combination of gray and tan. The same can be said of coyotes, with the exception that black coloration is rare. The coats of both wolves and coyotes, unlike dogs, are seldom spotted.
The tail of a wolf or a coyote hangs down, sticks out straight, or in cases when the animal is displaying dominance, stands up. However, unlike many dogs, the tail of a wolf or a coyote doesn't tightly curl up like this dog's.
Overall, the facial features of a wolf appear large, blocky, and less pointed than those of a coyote. The ears of a wolf are short and rounded when compared to the taller and more pointed ears of a coyote. If the ears of the animal you observed hang down, then you saw a dog.
The muzzle of a wolf is blunt and far more squared off than the sharp muzzle of a coyote. Due to the skull structure, the eyes are set a little differently than a dog or a coyote. They appear almond-shaped. At night, they sometimes cast, as Aldo Leopold so aptly put it, a green fire. Look at the differences between the eyes and facial features of this wolf and dog.
By and large, most dogs bear little resemblance to wolves. However, from a distance, some breeds such as German Shepherds and Malamutes can easily be mistaken for wolves. In addition, wolves and dogs are often interbred, leading to an animal that closely resembles a wolf.
Wolves have big feet. There's variation in size between male and female. The track of an adult wolf is over 4 inches long, not counting the toenails, and at least 3.5 inches wide. As you can see, toenails show up very well on wolf tracks. A track that looks very similar to a wolf track is a mountain lion. The main difference is that toenails don't show up on mountain lions. Their nails stay drawn in, and the back of the pad will have a lobe that extends down rather than the pad of the wolf that's either straight across or somewhat recessed. A coyote track structurally looks very similar to a wolf track. The main difference is size. It also shows toenails, but is considerably smaller than a wolf track. Wolves' stride, or inner group distance between their front and back feet, will be anywhere from 24 up to 30 inches long. A mountain lion or a cougar, on the other hand, have a much shorter stride, and it may be 14, 16, 18 inches. It depends on if it's going uphill, downhill, walking, running, or carrying prey. But in general, wolf strides tend to be much longer than cougars or coyotes. Because in the wintertime, sometimes all you see is a hole in the soft snow, a way to tell a predator from an ungulate is to imagine a straight line and look at how on the left here, these wolf tracks pretty much follow that line. There's very little straddle from the left side to the right side. An ungulate track tends to straddle that line. Another thing that can be confusing in wintertime is that lion hounds are run on backcountry roads, and hound tracks can be very similar to wolf tracks. A howling survey, which is simply people going out into the field and howling in an attempt to get wolves to howl back, is one method of confirming the presence of wolves. However you describe a wolf's howl, melancholy, discordant, melodious, or eerie, it's definitely a howl.
The howl of a coyote, on the other hand, is higher pitched and often accompanied by yips. The howls of summer wolf pups are indistinguishable from coyotes. While the howl of a wolf and dog may be similar, your location when you hear the howl can help you judge whether it came from a wolf or dog. For instance, if you're in the middle of the wilderness, a Las Vegas bookie would lay odds that you heard a wolf. If you hear numerous howls, odds are also likely you heard wolves, unless, of course, there's a team of sled dogs in the neighborhood.
Scat happens, and because it happens regularly and all over the place, it can be useful in identifying the presence of wolves. Wolves are larger than coyotes or dogs, so their scats are larger. The presence of hair in the scat tells you the scatter ate another animal rather than Alpo. While scats in conjunction with other clues can be useful in confirming the presence of wolves, scat by themselves are not conclusive. Okay, let's review the important differences between wolves, dogs, and coyotes. Generally speaking, wolves are larger than dogs and coyotes. Wolves appear spare and lanky, while dogs appear more compact.
Compared to a coyote or dog, the feet and legs of a wolf appear exaggerated. People often comment on how tall a wolf looks.
Wolves possess broader facial features than coyotes. The muzzle of a wolf appears blocky when compared to the pointed snout of a coyote. And the ears of a coyote stand long and pointed when compared to those of a wolf.
Two traits often found in dogs that don't occur in wolves and coyotes are ears that flop or hang down and tightly curled tails.
The howls of a wolf are low-pitched and melodious compared to the high-pitched howls and yips of a coyote. An adult wolf track is over 4 inches long. If you come across any of these clues, report them to your local U.S. Forest Service, State Fish and Game, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And be sure to note the date and the location.
Now that you've become a 10-minute expert on differentiating wolves from coyotes and dogs, let's try that test again.
We repeat, this is only a test.
Okay, let's see how you did. This is a dog. The main clue here is the curved tail. And while not tightly curled, it has far more curve to it than you would see in the tail of a wolf. The clues here are the black coloration, which is rare in coyotes, the lanky legs, and those intense eyes of a wolf. This one's a toughie. That's a dog, actually a wolf hybrid. The coloration helps give it away, as do the facial features. Those long pointed ears reveal that this is a coyote. How many of you thought this was a wolf scent rolling? You, over there in the khaki colored shirt, you thought it was a wolf, didn't you? Wrong. It's a dog, and it's the tail that gives it away. This is a wolf, an autumn wolf pup. Looks a lot like a well-fed coyote, doesn't it? This one's a giveaway. That's a wolf. Now here's your chance to score big bonus points. What is it? If you said Wolfzilla, give yourself 1,000 extra bonus points and a big pat on the back.
If you weren't able to get each and every one, don't sweat it. Quick identification in the field and being able to distinguish the difference between wolves and coyotes and dogs is difficult. Remember this, experts admit uncertainty. It's the neophytes that are always certain.
This concludes our test. We now return you to your previously scheduled life. Have a nice day.
Hi, my name is Blue Tanteri. I made the video Montana Streams Worth Permitting. It's about the permits that you need to get to work on a stream in Montana. Lots of people think just because the stream is on their land, they can do anything they want with it. But that's not the case. And I hope people watching it will realize not only what a precious resource that we have in Montana, but a resource that they have in their own hands if a stream runs through their property.
Water and land, the essential elements of life. Even those weary of the work connected with them never tire of watching the land and the water that shapes that land, from snow peaks to valley bottoms. Ever the same, always changing. It is that changing that concerns many people. Hydrologists say the essence of a river is change, though many people seem to forget that when they buy a piece of property.
A person buys a piece of ground next to a stream, and for some reason they have the perception that that stream is always going to be in one place. And so you need to understand in most 310 situations that the streams are dynamic, and there is going to be some change with time, and there's virtually nothing you can do to stop that. So if you expect to have the stream stay exactly like it was for 100 years, forget it. It's just not going to happen. And so what you want to do is get it as stable as you can so the movement is slow, predictable, so that you can change your facilities, live, do whatever you want, and in harmony with that change, rather than try to stand there and fight it and get yourself in a position where you get very frustrated and spend an awful lot of money.
So many people like to be able to see the creek, and so they're out here trying to cut down all the brush so they can see the creek, and really in the long run all they're doing is causing themselves potential problems and downstream owners potential problems.
Streams normally will go out of their bank once every 3 or 4 years at most, and many in fact go out of their banks virtually every year. And this is a natural phenomenon, and it should be understood that this is what happens.
When a stream overflows its banks, the water ends up on the floodplain.
From the point of view of the stream, what the floodplain is a temporary water storage facility. And when the watershed dumps more water into the river than the channel can handle, the river just backs the water up onto the floodplain and stores it there for a while until the channel can get around to draining it away. And so the floodplain is a water storage facility. It's an absolutely essential part of the river, and it is definitely a part of the river. It is. So when people go out and build their houses in the floodplain, they are not building their house beside the river, as they assume. They are, in fact, building their house in the river, within an essential part of the river.
Normally, you want to spread the water out on the floodplain, and when you do that, you actually find the channel is protected more than if you just simply had the water at bank full flow. The bank full flow is the most damaging flow on a channel. It causes the highest velocities and the most erosion. It's far better to let the water go above bank and out on the floodplain than that you actually have the velocity in the channel lowered because of the waters that are working in the floodplain. Too often I see people trying to keep the water in the channel, and that's a disaster because it only sends the water downstream to hurt somebody else.
When streams or the sediments they carry cause problems, it's important to look at the entire stream system.
Obviously, the water totally ignores boundaries. And so when you go out and start to work, it's obvious that you can't stop at somebody's property line and say this is the end, because it could well be the problem is upstream on somebody else's property, and that problem is causing maybe some sediments to come down and deposit on your ground that causes you problems. So instead of fighting the sediments where they dump on you, often it's much better to go upstream and deal with them at their sources. And so by simply looking at a stream, you can find out what's going on and then try to get the root cause rather than deal with symptoms.
When you straighten the reach of the stream to protect that part of the floodplain from flooding, you displace the flood hazard downstream, and the people who live immediately below the straightened reach of the stream then get the flood they would normally get plus the flood the people upstream did not get. They get tremendously increased flood hazard. And so it has sort of the moral quality of dumping your garbage over your neighbor's fence. You protect yourself from stream flooding at somebody else's expense.
It costs a lot of money to fix a problem rather than to prevent it. Take Big Spring Creek over at Lewistown, where a landowner straightened nearly 3/4 of a mile of channel to fit in a few more trailer homes. Landowners both upstream and downstream lost considerable property due to erosion, and a major highway bridge was badly damaged. Who paid for the repairs? It wasn't the person who straightened the channel, but you and I.
The damage done by straightening Big Spring Creek helped people realize we needed to protect the resources we all depend on for drinking water, irrigation, recreation, and fish.
I love to fish. That's my favorite sport. I'm a fly fisherman, and it's convenient for me to do because it's right here. I really enjoy fishing.
Back in the late 1950s and early 1960s, fisheries researchers found that a lot of streams were being altered by various activities such as road building, channel changes. Channels were straightened to make room for more farmland, and also persons are trying to protect their property and not really realizing what kind of projects that they were putting into, that they were badly damaging a lot of stream habitat out there.
A survey found that nearly 1/3 of the streams studied in Montana had been altered in some way, and in some cases nearly 90% of the fish and aquatic life had been destroyed. Because of the potential for damage, 2 laws were passed. The Stream Protection Act, which regulates activities of government agencies that may affect streams, was passed by the Montana legislature in 1963 and is administered by the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. The Natural Streambed and Land Preservation Act often known as the 310 Law, is administered by local conservation districts. The 310 Law says that a private individual or corporation needs to get a permit from the conservation district before doing any work that could affect a natural, perennial stream. The law was passed in 1975, but it didn't pass easily. Don Bianchi, then a fisheries biologist for the Department of Fish, Wildlife and Parks, worked with Siv Seidensticker, a Ruby Valley rancher and conservation district supervisor.
I called meetings and I got the landowners and sportsmen together. That's all we had, landowner and sportsman. We did not include the fish and game whatsoever for the first 6 or 8 months.
At that point in time, it was obvious that many stream alterations and much fish habitat was being destroyed by private individuals, while we did have somewhat of a handle on local governments and state governments.
I got hold of Don and I said, Don, let's get together and come up with a bill that we can all live with. And that was the start of coming up with Senate Bill 310.
You know, we didn't have any 100% agreement on that bill. I know Siv took a lot of pressure from agricultural groups because even some of the conservation districts, individual ones, were not supporting the bill. I took a lot of heat from certain individuals within the Fish and Game Department.
But the secret to the whole thing was how the bill was constructed. The decisions were made in the field, up on the bank of the river, wherever the project's going to be. There you had the landowner, a representative of the Conservation District, you had a representative of the Fish and Game Department. And by working everything out right there in the field, you could see what had to be done and all agree on something is what really made it a successful bill. You didn't always agree right away, but you would in time, back and forth.
One of the immediate benefits of the law is that over the past 15 years, old car bodies have ceased to be the state of the art for stream bank maintenance in this state.
Bradshaw sees other benefits.
So to the extent that the 310 law discourages unneeded activity in the stream bed, it's real important to the protection of fisheries and the benthic insects in which they depend. It's not a matter of stopping all activity, but directing the activity in ways which will reduce the amount of disruption to the stream bed and banks that we can.
Reducing disruption takes a concerted effort, and vital to that effort are locally elected conservation district supervisors.
Conservation district supervisors come from all walks of life, and often they are irrigators, contractors, businessmen themselves. So it makes good sense to have local people administer local issues. It's a perfect example of government by the people.
Conservation districts may seek advice and assistance in administering the 310 law from a number of state and federal agencies. The districts receive administrative and legal advice from the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. Soil Conservation Service staff provide technical advice and design on many projects. This irrigation diversion required extensive disruption of the stream bed every year. So, SCS engineers worked with the multiple landowners involved to find a permanent solution to the problem.
This permanent diversion will span across the river right below us here, below this dike. The gravel will already be removed, and the temporary diversion plates will be out, and essentially you won't even know it's here.
It's actually not replacing the structure, but it's replacing the procedure, and that is dozing up a dike every year and diverting it into a canal system.
One thing about this dike being here all the time is this river gets a lot of ice on it in the wintertime, and it backs up even into town because this dike is here, and I think it's a major concern of the town. So with this dike out of here, hopefully alleviates some of the ice problems in town.
A question many people ask is, just what is a perennial stream?
It would be a stream that would, in its natural historical state, flow continuously the year round during both wet and dry years. I would suggest that conservation districts, in implementing that a definition, that not be too concerned that it be a stream that flows at all times during all periods. As long as it's one that generally flows during most years, I think it would constitute a perennial flowing stream.
There may be perennial reaches of a stream, even if the entire stream doesn't flow all year. Usually, districts consult USGS topographic maps to determine whether or not a stream is natural and perennial. Any activity that could affect the bed or banks of a perennial stream requires a 310 permit. Some of those activities include culverts, bridges, riprap, diversions, some mining activities, boat docks, and retaining walls. By going through the 310 process, you get advice that in the long run saves you money, as well as protects the stream and its fisheries. These culverts were installed before the 310 law was enacted, and they are too small and too few for the size of the drainage. Spring runoff will eventually take out the road, and the landowner will have an expensive repair job. Sometimes people apply for a 310 permit to get advice. Other times they apply for a 310 permit when they've got a problem.
We've been having a problem with a deep channel right alongside of our existing rock riprap along the bank, and it was undermining those rocks and falling into the river. And practically every year we had to go in and do repair on it.
Basically, the creek has changed its channel and gone out and peeled off some of these banks, and it's like Mark and Phil and I were talking that they've rip-wrapped above this, and our feeling is that this has just moved the velocity of the creek, the power of it down further, and it just keeps chewing out.
Revegetating can help stabilize the banks.
One thing that's forgotten more than anything is the ability of vegetation to stabilize. In fact, we tend to plant rock in the streams with vegetation. And then the rock protects the vegetation and the vegetation protects the rock.
Sometimes innovative solutions are suggested.
To aim the downstream face of the structure so that it aims the water where you want it to go. So when the water goes across that structure, it's aimed perpendicular to the downstream face. So
Where
in
you
this
put the arrows here, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
After a 310 permit is applied for, the district determines if the proposed activity is a project under the 310 law. Applicants are asked to provide as much information as possible about their project. That information may include aerial photos, equipment to be used, and construction plans. The supervisors and the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks may decide to inspect the site of the proposed activity. Inspections are done by a 3-member team made up of a representative of the Conservation District, a representative of the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and the applicant or the applicant's representative.
Well, as a team member from the department and as a fisheries biologist, we review these projects to basically look at impacts on the stream, the water quality, and the fisheries within. Those are my main concerns on this project and what impacts from the projects would have on bull trout in this system.
For minor regular maintenance on irrigation diversions, conservation districts can issue a maintenance permit, sometimes called the 661 permit, which is good for up to 10 years.
Well, basically, this particular project doesn't qualify for 661 because it is not a routine type project where it's a small maintenance thing on existing common type channel. It appears to me that next year this whole project may be different. He could actually have more water, no water, and he may take a different tactic. Given that, it qualifies 310, not 661.
If your project will muddy the water, you may need to get a permit from the Water Quality Bureau.
A lot of the times when a 310 is issued, a person may also need what we call a 3A authorization. It's a short-term turbidity authorization for a person to exceed state turbidity standards during the construction activity. A lot of the times under the 310 team inspection, the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has the opportunity to check off on the 3A authorization for the Water Quality Bureau acting on our behalf. If that's the case, the individual may not need to come to the Bureau.
If we feel there's going to be significant turbidity in the stream, we would check off that the applicant obtain a 3A exemption from the Water Quality Bureau. And if we don't feel there would be a significant increase in turbidity, then we wouldn't require it.
After the inspection, team members submit a report to the Board of Supervisors, who discuss and then vote on whether to approve, deny, or modify the project. The Board of Supervisors' decision on a project can be appealed by the landowner or by the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. An important aspect of the 310 law is its provision for emergencies. If a situation on a stream poses an immediate threat, a landowner may take action to protect life or property. Then, within 15 days after the emergency activity, the landowner must contact the Conservation District and apply for a 310 permit. If an emergency arises more than once every 5 years, the district will request that a more permanent solution to the problem be found. Districts often receive complaints from the public about activities on streams that may be a violation of the 310 law. Don McIntyre emphasizes the need to get complaints about possible 310 violations in writing.
I think that the supervisors should insist that every complaint that is phoned into them or given to them in oral fashion should be followed up with a written complaint.
Districts follow up on all complaints received. Districts prefer to settle problems out of court with the landowners involved. But if the problem cannot be resolved, it must be turned over to the county attorney for prosecution. Violations can bring fines of up to $500 a day. Some violations may seem minor, as in this case where children piled rocks in the creek while playing. But the rocks directed high water onto this bank and caused considerable erosion. And now the road and bridge are in danger. It will cost a homeowners association thousands of dollars to stabilize the bank. Other permits may be needed before working in a stream.
In addition to the 310 permit that the Conservation District in Cascade County would issue for you here, you should also try to contact the Corps of Engineers. Their office for this area is located over in Helena. And if you're placing any fill or pouring a concrete wall along the bank here, you should get a 404 permit from the Corps of Engineers.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought you were the permitting agency.
404 permits are required whenever dredged or fill material is to be placed in the waters of the United States, including rivers, streams, lakes, or wetlands. 404 permits require evaluations of project alternatives that are less damaging to rivers, streams, and wetlands.
Some of the projects that may require permits would include bank stabilization activities, minor stream crossings like bridges or culverts, or irrigation intakes where there involves a placement of material. Anything involving work in the streams may require some form of authorization. Yeah, we work on a very close basis with the conservation districts. Whenever we issue a nationwide permit letter or a public notice, we also provide the conservation districts with a copy of that. We also go out on team inspections on site. Generally, we try to cooperate as much as possible because if you need a 310, chances are you need a permit from the Corps.
The Corps of Engineers and the Environmental Protection Agency both have authority to enforce Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. If someone proceeds without a 404 permit, he or she may be ordered to remove the fill and restore the affected area and can be subject to fines and penalties of up to $25,000 a day. The Montana Water Quality Bureau provides state water quality certification on all 404 permits under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. Failure to get this certification can result in an additional $25,000 per day fine.
In addition to the 310 and 3A permits, an applicant may also need, depending on the type of activity, a discharge permit. And there are several permits that issued under the Montana Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, typically called MPDES, for discharges to state waters from a construction activity or maybe from a placer mining activity. The applicant needs to check with the Water Quality Bureau because oftentimes Conservation District may not know the necessity of getting that permit. So it's also a good idea to call the Bureau if you're going to do some type of activity in the stream.
The Montana Department of State Lands issues either a license or an easement for the use of its lands, including the bottoms of navigable lakes and streams.
The state of Montana, through a series of historic U.S. Supreme Court decisions, owns the bottom of navigable lakes and streams in Montana. And that's an incident of statehood or state sovereignty.
Montana uses the federal test to determine whether or not a stream is navigable.
Essentially, the federal test is whether it can be used for commerce. The Dearborn River was recently declared navigable on the basis that you could float railroad ties down it during a certain portion of the year.
Floodplains have been designated in several Montana counties. If you are building anything in the floodplain, contact your local floodplain administrator to see if a permit is necessary. All of these permits are summarized in this free booklet.
One thing that we try to give to people when we go out on a 310 inspection like this is a guide to stream permitting in Montana, which tries to help some of the people that live along rivers and streams in Montana here an idea of what permits they have to get before a project is actually done.
More permits, huh?
Sometimes people feel there is too much red tape, but it is the best way we've come up with to ensure the health of our streams. And there is benefit to going through the permitting process.
Well, of course, you communicate with a lot of people, and you bring people out that are familiar with the erosion along the river, and you get them involved in your project. And in this case, we've got a different approach was brought out of this inspection trip. So yes, there was a lot of benefit to having that 310 permit.
Conservation districts hold the key to responsible stream development. They are most directly in touch with the landowners, and the need for good water and stable streams. The 310 law and other permits were designed to minimize the impact any one of us can have on a resource that is important to all of us. It's in our best interest to see that the water and the land it runs through remain healthy for everyone.